Hello, my friend, and welcome to Beyond, the personal growth podcast for the people who are healing beyond their conditioning and beyond the cycles that played out before them. My name is Katie Lynn, and with 20 years of experience in the field of psychology and human behavior, I am bringing my natural curiosity, expertise, and personal life experiences here for discussions that are guaranteed to be informative, inspiring, and entertaining. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Okay, today on the podcast, we have Madeline. Madeline, thank you so much for being on. It's wonderful to have you here. What would you like to create today?
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. I feel like, there were so many things going through my head. I think the biggest thing that I've struggled with is a lot of shame around my life and business and how it was all created from kind of a really scary situation from leaving a narcissist who was very abusive in all ways. And it's been a big challenge of mine to feel proud of where I am and what I've created because it came from so much negativity. And it's been hard for me to share certain things or be excited for certain things when it comes to my life and my business because, it was years and years of abuse, and I feel ashamed I even let it happen to me, especially in a place that, I've always been in leadership roles in the companies that I've worked for. Now I own a business and in the CEO role where people look up to me. And it feels like that imposter syndrome almost of like, how could you look up to me? I let, all of these things happen to me for years and years. And I think that's the biggest thing that I really struggle with to this day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How long were you in that relationship for?
That was like 6 years of my life and a lot of ups and downs. We had a miscarriage together, which I think was that like extra bonding, like factor of going through that. And so I kind of stayed in that and then ended up, we had a son together after the miscarriage. And so it just kind of like these things kept happening that kept it together. And I felt like I had to stay until I had my son. And really then my eyes were open to like, wow, like I would never let him treat my son this way. Like, how have I let him treat me this way? And I think that's where all that shame and guilt comes from of like, gosh, I didn't even see that. I wasn't taking care of myself. I couldn't even see beyond that. It took me having my baby. Like, I always say, I'm like, my son totally saved my life, and I'm so grateful for how things happened because I am now out of that situation. But yeah, it's very hard for me to know what I put up with and let happen.
Yeah. I want to acknowledge you first before we dive into this for your ability to see it when your son was born and then to have the courage and the conviction to make the changes that needed to be made because it's not easy. Even if we're intelligent women and we are talented and we have all of the qualities, making a change like that, like leaving an unhealthy relationship, or we want to give, I think, everything our best and our all. And I think in those circumstances, sometimes we question ourselves of like, have I done everything I can? Have I given everything that I can? Am I being gracious? Am I being kind? Right? Do you resonate with that? Yeah.
100, all of that ran through my head like the entire time. I'm like, maybe just one more session of therapy, or maybe this, it's like tried every single thing until I just couldn't anymore.
Yeah. In this moment, do you believe that you gave it everything you could have?
Oh, now, yes, 100%. I definitely pushed to get to that point. And after that, there was no turning back. I knew I had made that decision and it was done.
Great. So I want to do a little, an exercise with you if you're open to it.
Sure.
I'd like for you to close your eyes. And are you a visual person? Okay. Okay, great. I'd like you to imagine the version of you, let's say 6.5 years ago. I'd like you to see her in front of you as if she's standing in front of you.
Okay.
Let me know when you can see her.
I can see her.
Okay. How do you feel when you see her?
I feel sad for her. She seems broken, um, lost. So I feel a lot of empathy, I guess, and sadness.
Hmm. Yeah. You now keep your eyes closed. You, as the version of the woman that you are now, knowing what you've navigated in the last 6.5 years, knowing what you've been through, knowing who you've become, what would you say to her?
That's a good question. Um, I would probably say that it does get better. Like you will be okay. Because I know how hopeless I felt and that this
Hmm.
was just going to be my life and that you actually will get through it. And as hard as it's going to be, you're going to make it out and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. How does it feel to say that?
I mean, it feels good to say that because now I feel like I'm on the other side. And I think I don't have as much compassion for myself because I blame myself for a lot,
Hmm.
but it really wasn't my fault. You know, I think I feel like the frog in boiling water where it's like I didn't notice so many things for so long until it got really bad and then I felt stuck. And so that's not my fault. Like that was something that happened, to me. And, I finally have gone through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to have more compassion, I think, for myself
Well,
instead of
it sounds like you already have it. Like you
I
were
have
able to
some.
access it. Yeah. You were able to
Yeah,
access it when you closed your eyes and when you saw her in front of you.
yes.
So it's not like there's no compassion.
Yeah, yep.
It seems more like maybe there gets to be an embrace of her,
Hmm.
an embrace of the the choices, the
Yeah,
vulnerability, right? It sounds
yeah,
like when I said, how does she feel for you? You're like, she
right.
seems sad, she seems lost. I can't remember
Yep,
if you said broken or not.
yeah,
Um, but like what a tender place, right? And you in your best would have never chosen. You probably could have
right,
seen the signs. You probably could have intuitively connected and been like, something really does feel off, right?
right.
And I think as humans, and especially as women, we have these very vulnerable seasons in our life
Yeah,
that often come in so that we can get a lesson that is literally going to usher in the greatest transformation we've experienced, which it sounds like you've
yeah,
experienced since then.
yeah,
And man, is it ugly,
yeah.
like, don't we wish it could be beautiful and, very fairy tale
It's
ish
so
and,
true.
Disney esque, maybe even.
Yep.
And it's not.
Yeah,
And it's not. And so we kind of look back at it with this judgment. And I heard a word that you
right.
used a couple of times, and that was fault.
Yeah,
Like it wasn't my fault. And I want to pull this out a little bit and just untangle it a bit because
sure,
even if it was, you still deserve compassion
sure. Yeah,
and love and
yep.
acceptance and honoring, right? I think of like our toddlers, which we kind of
Yeah,
connected over,
yeah.
it's like I spilled my milk and it's like it definitely, or sometimes if they get angry, maybe they throw a
Right.
block, right? And we're like, don't throw the block.
Yep.
And they're, and it's like that's something like that. We would bring in the concept of fault, or we could. And
Right.
even still, it's like I still love you. I'm
Yeah.
still here with you. You still are worthy of all the beautiful things in the world. And
Yep.
maybe let's make a different choice next time.
Yeah.
Now we have greater awareness of
Right.
how things move and who we are.
Hmm.
How does
I
that
love
feel for
that.
you?
I really love that. Yeah. And I think this is actually super helpful because I feel like I almost compartmentalize what happened to me before. And like I kind of put her in a corner. So when we're talking about like the compassion piece, when I'm sitting and I can like visualize like we just did, it's helpful. And then I like put her back away. And I think I
Hmm.
need to be okay with living in that, like, that, yes, that happened, but it's part of me. And like, now look at all this goodness that's happening after, like I did, like you just said, and have the compassion and still it's just a part of me and not have to like hide it away. Cause I think that's what builds on that shame and like spiral that
Yes.
I go on because I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I just got to put her back over there. Like, oh, I don't want to like talk about that because that wouldn't be something someone would like look up to me for, but technically I think maybe it would be like I did actually make a better choice after. And that's eye-opening to think about it in that way.
I love that you got there. I
Yeah.
love that you
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
there because sure, the person who wins every game is inspirational, right? The
Right.
person who's like never lost anything is like, wow, that's incredible. It's so rare. And the person who loses and gets back up
Yeah.
and learns and figures it out and receives the wisdom and embodies the wisdom as a result of navigating a situation like that,
Right.
that's super inspiring. That's like,
Yeah.
because it not just is it inspiring, it's also so hopeful. And in your story, I hear my story, and that's
Yeah.
true, right? That's not just hypothetical. Like I literally,
Right.
like, as you speak, I'm like, oh yeah, I've been there. Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
got her. She's 23. She's suppressed herself. She's not dealing with grief that needs to be dealt with. She's not dealing with transformation that needs to be dealt with. She's
Yep.
bulldozing her way through life to bring forward the American dream. And then she does it by the time she's 26, and it's purgatory.
Yeah.
And now what, right? Now she's 26 and
Yeah.
everything's propped up and everything looks good. There's so much unhealthy behavior, unhealthy relating, toxicity running through all of it, right?
Yeah.
And that journey of, do I have the courage to dismantle it all
Right.
and disappoint people and maybe even upset myself and the paradigms I've held up until this point?
Right.
And do I have the conviction to believe in myself enough to know that I could create something different, and I'm going to give it a shot? I'm either going to
Yep.
create something different or I'm going to die trying.
Yes.
Like shout out to 50 Cent, I'm going to give it everything. And that
Yeah.
really is the beauty of that point that you described. Like there is a memory that I have where I'm in the hospital and I just gave birth to my first son, who's now 13. And the doctor puts him in my arms and this wash comes over me of just the greatest love I've ever experienced in the world. And
Yep.
I look over and I go, oh my gosh, I don't love that man. I don't even know love. This is the first time I couldn't even love
Right.
him because I didn't know love in this
Yep.
way. And that moment was so transformative for me. And I don't really, like, as I look back at her, 12 years
Yeah.
later, 13 years later, I'm like, I don't know how else God would have delivered that message to me in a way that I
Right.
would have understood it at that time.
Oh no, that's I was the same exact way. It took my son to realize a lot of those things. And I mean, that love is like unmatched, like
Unmatched. It is
right when you see
unmatched.
them. And yeah, without that, I feel like I could have kept going in that really wrong direction and not seeing the light. And so, yeah, that totally resonates with me 100%.
Yeah. So I love that you naturally retold the story.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge part of the healing, right? Is the acceptance, which we tapped into when you saw her in front of you. And then the rewriting of the narrative, right? Of like, yeah, for a period of time, I was so mad at my younger self. I had all of these emotions, these judgments, right? Like, I'm a smart woman. How did I do that? Or even, when people meet you now and they're baffled, right? They're just like, I could never see you in a situation like that because it's so different from how and who we know you to be.
Right.
And yet she really was the one that set the stage for the power now, the embodiment, the worthiness.
Yep.
Now I see that coming from 2 miles away.
100%.
And it doesn't even come near me anymore because I'm so not a match for it,
Yep.
And what a gift, right? What a relief of like, oh, now I'm equipped. So how do you think this new narrative can influence your life going forward?
Well, I feel like the biggest thing that I'd like to do is to actually share my story more with others. Because kind of like you were saying, I feel like I didn't necessarily see someone who was a leader, who was all of these other things, who was talking about something like that happening to them. I just felt crazy. So if I can share my story and feel confident in all of those pieces leading up to who I am now, that hopefully somebody else can look at that and see, like, oh my gosh, like that's what's happening to me. Like there is something else. Like I could get to a better place, or I can do something. It's not too late. And so I think that's my biggest piece, has always been like trying to work through all of this to be able to share that and hopefully help other people. And that's been the biggest thing, like just getting over the shame and the like all the things, and putting her in the corner, like I said. And this has been helpful in like thinking about it in a totally different way, so that hopefully I can start sharing that and it won't feel so like icky or imposter syndrome. Like it doesn't have to be that narrative.
Yeah. And the thing about imposter syndrome that comes up for me quite a bit in the way that I conceptualize it and teach it is that there's two types. There's the imposter syndrome of, I'm this great leader and I've made some mistakes and I don't want you to know about my mistakes, because then you might not think I'm as great as you think I am now. There's that kind of imposter syndrome. But there's also the other kind of imposter syndrome that she was dealing with at that point in time, which was she didn't know her greatness. So she was acting like she wasn't.
Right.
That's just as damaging and inauthentic and problematic, right? Because in those moments, we thought of ourselves as our grief or as our inadequacies or as our deficiencies in that moment. And we were living our lives as though those were true.
Right.
When this leader has lived in you the entire time, right? This woman that you are now has always existed.
Right.
She just had been through some life things that she didn't particularly maybe have the resources to navigate through or out of it in that moment,
Yeah.
And I know that for sure to be true with my story, because in those early 20s, like I think Hot Mess Express was an understatement for me, I just like, what happened?
Same here.
And now when I think about her, I bring her close and I just want to hug her. Just like, God, I'm so proud of you. Like life literally threw so much at you, and through it all, there was still this inkling that you trusted. There was still this knowing, this nagging internally of like, this isn't it for me. This isn't it for me. Like, I know there's something different. I know there's something else. And I'm so proud of her for having the conviction and the courage, because man, had she decided that that was it for her, oh, what a different life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you say that too, because my 20s also Hot Mess Express. It's like 100% there, because now when I'm like thinking back on some of that, I've always had that nagging, like what you were talking about, like it has to be better than this. This can't be it. Because I actually, prior to the ex that we're speaking about, I was married, and I got married to my high school sweetheart, and very different type of person. But we were like 21 when we got married. We just didn't know anything. And he ended up, cheating on me and was very detached. And so I think then I was like, well, I can't do that. Like, I'm better than dealing with that. And so I left because of that nagging feeling. And then I met this person. And I took the narcissistic, like the jealousy, the like controlling things as, oh, he actually cares. Because I didn't feel that from my last person. It looked so different. And I was like, oh, this must be what it's supposed to be like. I had no clue, right? All like what you were saying, I didn't have the tools to like figure that out. It looked really good, on the outside in the beginning. Yeah. Knowing now, like looking back, I'm like, I just had no concept of what it should look like. I really, I thought that it was something totally different. And now I know, right? I can see it from 100 miles away.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting how that's evolved. And then again, finally, that like feeling came back of, okay, no, this still isn't it.
Yes.
And being able to remove myself again from a situation that just wasn't serving me.
Two things come up as I hear you share that. First is, this is why we need your story, is because there aren't, like, I don't know about you, but I didn't go through a relationships course in my teens or my early 20s, right? Like I saw my parents' relationship and their relationship is great. And they've been married for 40 years almost, right? So like, it's
same
awesome.
with my parents.
I had a great,
so,
and I had a great template, right? And I also still was dealing with my own stuff. And so I didn't really have a course. And so I feel like hearing your story and having more of these stories out here, if I could have heard some of this, maybe I wouldn't have had to navigate something so extreme and severe,
right?
And then the second thing is that, like, really understanding that we're in a lifelong process. And I like to refer to these as like chapters in my life book, but like these chapters of our life book are so important to our development and really showing us our creative power. Because the beauty of this, as I hear you talk about this, is I have not heard not even 1 ounce of victim in there. You share from such an empowered place. And I heard you acknowledge the shame, right? And I heard you acknowledge like maybe some dissatisfaction or disappointment still. Or one of the things that really in my journey, I remember the moment I prepared myself to file for divorce. I told myself consciously, I will not be the stereotypical single mother. I will not identify as that. I will not identify as a victim. I remember this conscious agreement to myself, right? And that really set a tone of understanding that, yes, I walked through these things. And yes, I made choices that led to some consequences and some outcomes that were very unfavorable. Yes, some people tried to warn me and I brushed them off and was stubborn in my ways and all of that, right? And I still was able to understand that I have a hand in creating how this turns out.
Right.
And that's a super powerful place to live from. The ability to go, I messed up, I messed up. I made some choices and I'm okay. And I'm still worthy. And I'm probably even more worthy now that I know the difference and have the distinction.
Right. Absolutely. No, it's a super powerful place, I think, to come from. And now the longer I keep going in this life, I'm like, oh, wow, like I get to decide like my next move. And like, it just is, it's so empowering to be able to come from that place versus, what is the phrase of like things are happening for me, not like to me. Like I can keep moving forward and I can keep deciding to change it. And it's a very cool place to be now, coming through all that, because for a long time I felt like the opposite of that, right? Like all this is happening to me and there's nothing I could do. My life is just going to be like this. So now having that like in my toolbox of things, to work with is just is so helpful.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. And I also love what you said too, of like, it's a constant journey of like continuing to work on things. Cause I feel like for a little while, I also was like, oh, I did my like EMDR therapy, or I did this thing and like it was successful. Like I did it. But then things still pop up, right? It doesn't fully all go away. Certain things will trigger others. And I'm like, okay. So like I constantly just have to be in the like space of growth and like, it's going to come back up and like, we're going to deal with it as it comes. And that's been an interesting kind of journey to figure out on my own too, of like, okay, yes, all those things are great, but you still have to continue working on it.
Yeah.
It doesn't just, there's no like end really.
No, there's no end. There's no certificate. There's no award. There's no, and that's really what sets some people apart from others, is the idea of I can fall in love with this process. And I am just like, the way I envision it is as if we're painting a picture and God, I use the word God, but God comes down and puts a new color on our palette. And we're like, I don't like that color, but if I put some other color in it, and if I can blend it a little bit, I can use it. And I really like, that's a way that I think about life, that is like, okay, well, I know more is coming. And if I know more is coming, then I can equip myself, I can prepare myself, I can stay psychologically flexible, which is a very powerful way to conceptualize the world and ourselves. Is not stone, I'm clay, and knows this life. And especially in a co-parenting dynamic and even in a blended family dynamic, there's so many iterations. There's so much like, we got to be flexible. We got to be creative. We're going to be compassionate and empathetic and patient and understanding, because I think the souls that came for real deep curriculum, we came from blended families. We have blended families. Our children were born into these dynamics. And so we signed up for like the accelerated program, especially those of us that have businesses, we're entrepreneurial, right? We were just like, give me the premium life package, please.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. We got the full meal deal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, amazing. So how do you feel now as we sit here?
I feel good. I feel like excited, that I can look at it from a different perspective where, like I said, I could actually start sharing these pieces to my story and it would feel right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was also validating to hear, like, when you said, I'm not coming from a place of talking about it like a victim. Cause again, like, that's the last thing. I'm very much like you were saying, of like, I'm not going to be like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
Single mom power. Like, I got this. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to share from a place of that. So when you said that, it was very validating of like, oh, maybe I'm like closer to that than I thought.
For sure.
Of being able to share. So I feel really excited.
Yeah. Especially because these situations, it's not like these people show up with a sign that says, hey, this is what you're signing up for. You know, it's not, nobody in these scenarios, self included, were we in our right mind to begin with. And that came through immediately when you visualized her. And I can look back, and I've done this visualization with myself hundreds of times, probably at this point, because my relationship with my 20-year-old self, 23-year-old self, 27-year-old self has gone through so many iterations. I wasn't thinking in my right mind either at all, that level of being able to go, I can be with all the feelings around her. I can have my moments of feeling disappointed. My brain might try to run off in a moment and be like, I wonder what would have happened if I never met that person, if I never would have said yes, if I never, and then we bring it back and we go, I'm in acceptance. I'm in power. I'm going forward. This is a chapter in my story. And I'm going to write it in a way that is empowering and sets me up for even better to come.
Right.
Amazing.
I love that.
So good. Anything else?
Yeah, this has been amazing.
Yay.
Gosh, this has been awesome. And totally, a light turned on for sure of, oh my gosh, I don't have to separate them anymore.
Yes.
And that feels really good.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing this story. I am so excited for people to hear it because it's important.
Thank you. I am too. Yeah. I'm really excited.
As we complete this episode, I would love to know your insights, takeaways, and feedback. You can message me on Instagram at Katie Lynn Rojano or send them via email to katie@katielynnrojano.com. Any products or digital downloads I mentioned can be found via the link in my Instagram bio. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to share it with at least one friend and leave a 5-star review so we can get these impactful dialogues into the lives of even more people. I would also like to thank my guest for their vulnerability and generosity in allowing us to learn from them and grow alongside them. Until next time, friends, let's go beyond.